When it comes to sprucing up your PC build, nothing really has quite the immediate impact as replacing your stock, boring black fans with some blingy RGB ones. Since Corsair came out with their Light Loop series last year, they've been my default answer whenever somebody asks me, what's the brightest, most colorful, most eye-catching fan on the market? But now, a new challenger has arisen, and Thermaltake has taken the Light Loop concept to the next level. Ready to dive into custom water cooling but unclear about what parts you might need? Check out Thermaltake's new M360 Plus Rgb Kit. Featuring a D5 pump res combo, 16mm hard tube, Pacific Sea Pro fittings, and the best RGB implementation on the market, the M360 Plus fits all mainstream Intel and AMD sockets and is fully expandable as your system evolves. Check out the link in the video description to learn more. These are the brand new Thermaltake Riing Trios, and if you thought the Light Loops were the brightest, most RGB, and most expensive fans you were ever going to see, well, you'd have been wrong on all three accounts. I wanted to compare the Trios to the Light Loops and see if they really are a better product, or if Corsair still sits at the top of the PC cooling food chain. First, let's take a look at their design. Corsair gets a lot of credit for inventing this kind of look, with a diffused, thick light bar mounted to the frame and running the perimeter around the spinning blades. However, they weren't the first ones to do it, as iGo actually beat them to market with the Aurora. Corsair did popularize the design though, as the Light Loops have become synonymous with heavy RGB infused builds. They also added a second ring of LEDs inside the hub, making them super bright and punchy. Thermaltake actually took this basic design and just turned it up a notch, adding a second separate loop to the back side of the fan and keeping the interior ring as well, making for 3 total rings of light, hence Ring Trio. Despite the added diffuser, they look very similar to the LLs from most angles, and in fact they feel pretty close to the same as well. Both of them sport solid build quality and a decent amount of heft for a case fan, letting you know that you've just purchased a premium product. When it comes to connectivity, I think Thermaltake has a clear win here. Both fans require proprietary connectivity and a controller box to function correctly, but the Ring Trios accomplish this with a single, extremely long, sleeved cable that plugs into their control hub, while Corsair still leans on their control system that I actually really dislike. The fans each have 2 separate wires, neither of which are particularly long. One is for PWM signal and the other is for RGB control. The RGB controller then needs to be plugged into a Lighting Node Pro or a Commander Pro unit, meaning that in order to make these fans function correctly, you'll need to connect 2 separate cables to 2 different connection points and 2 separate control boxes. There's just gotta be a simpler way to do it than this. Once plugged in, both Corsair and Thermaltake offer Rgb Control Software that works pretty well. You have the option of selecting each LED in the loop on both programs and assigning it its own color. And of course, there are standard RGB effect presets like Rainbow Wave, Pulse, and Marquee. I think the edge here does go to Corsair as far as software, but maybe that's because I'm more used to their interface and I like the professional look a little better than Thermaltake's, which comes across a bit cartoony almost. It's still perfectly functional, although I did have to derp around a bit while learning how to bring up certain controls. The sheer number of LEDs you can address here is actually a bit daunting, and I'd be curious to see how many people actually go through the process of changing all 30 versus just sticking with a pre-configured pattern or even just a solid color. Performance-wise, these are very close when we just look at the spec sheet. The fan speeds are almost identical, as they both top out at 1500 RPM and have minimum speeds of 500 for the Trios and 600 for the LLs. Both brands boast that these fans are meant for radiators. Corsair lists the Light Loop's flow type as static pressure, whereas Thermaltake just straight up calls them radiator fans. In practice, actually, neither of them provide anything close to the best static pressure for pushing air through radiators, with the rings pushing 1.4 millimeter of water, while the light loops do slightly better at 1.61. For reference, Noctua's NFF12s push 2.61 millimeters of water, and even Corsair's own ML120 Pros are rated at 1.78. Still though, for most applications, both the rings and the light loops should do just fine if you slap them on an AIO or even a custom loop. They both run on hydraulic bearings, they both come in 3 packs, and they both cost an absurd amount of money. The light loops will set you back $110 for a 3-pack with a controller, while you have to drop $130 on a similar pack of ring trios. Neither of these is what you might call a budget option. I ran a couple of tests on the fans for noise levels and airflow. The first thing I did was measure ambient noise levels in the room, which for my studio on the day of testing was unfortunately fairly high due to a water incident, as I had an industrial dehumidifier humming away close by. Then I connected both fans up and ran them at their max speeds, which again is the same at 1500 RPM. The ring trios were measurably quieter than the light loops, and although a few decibels doesn't seem like much, multiply that by however many fans you plan on installing and it can actually make a big difference. I then tried to figure out a way to measure which fans were moving the most air. As I have no tool to actually measure volume of air moved, I resorted to other methods. I reasoned that because I have 2 fans of the exact same size spinning at the exact same speed, I can use an anemometer to measure wind speed coming off the blades to approximate which is moving more air. If this is incorrect, please let me know where my reasoning went off the rails here and what I might be able to do in the future for a more accurate measurement. The ring trios edged out the light loops here in this test as well. And then we come to the thing that people tend to care about the most when it comes to case fans. How do they look? Well, to be honest, they're both pretty awesome. Thermaltake has the advantage when it comes to brightness and number of modes for sure. And I think as these are basically coming from the same design language, the one with the more LEDs just kind of wins by default. It's a tough call definitely, as having either in your rig is going to be eye-catching, but I think that I prefer the ring trios overall. Not to mention the fact that because the rings are actually exposed, if you flip the fans around and you have them facing the other direction, you actually also still get the light loop facing into your case, so you're gonna have illumination either way. You actually don't get that with the Corsair fans because the light loop is only on the outside and not on the inside. But the question here is, do you prefer one over the other? Does ecosystem continuity matter? Let me know down below in the comments. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and consider supporting BPS Customs directly by picking up a shirt or by joining our Patreon community. As always guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.